Now we'll move on to our second session for today, which is looking more at a macro development level at structure plans. And particularly we're looking at structure planning for climate and community resilience. So this session offers a comprehensive approach to assessing climate resilience and planning for long-term diversity and resilience. And our presenters will guide you through the process they used to ensure their community is prepared for the challenges ahead. They focused on sustainability and community engagement, and these case studies are geared towards resilient, adaptive communities that can thrive in the face of climate change. So first off, I'm pleased to introduce Anastasia, Badina and Justin Horne from Melton City Council in Melbourne's West, and they're going to talk about the Melton East Structure Plan. Anastasia is a senior strategic planner, coordinating Council's response on the Melton East Precinct Structure Plan. She specialises in growth area planning and is very passionate about contributing to making Melton a vibrant, safe and livable city accessible to all. Justin has been working in local government for around 20 years, working across many directorates including natural environment, sustainability, placemaking and the circular economy. He aims to develop the best outcomes to improve how we plan and develop towns and suburbs to make them better places for people to live, work and play, while protecting and improving the natural environment along the way. So over to you, Anastasia and Justin.
Thank you. Just working through the slide sharing.
Well, good. We assume you can see a screen.
Yes, great. Thanks.
Just first off, just want to acknowledge the lands on which Anastasia and I are presenting. We're on the lands of the Wurundjeri people here in Melbourne, but we also want to respect the Bunurong and Wadawurrung peoples on whose land we also work, learn and walk together on here at Melton. And also to anyone calling on today, we also want to pay our respects to any elders and First Nations people on the call. So the way we're structuring this is I'm just giving a bit of brief geography and background to the environment of Melton, and then I'll hand over to Anastasia to go into a bit of the information on how the precinct structure plan and how we're doing some work with the Victorian Planning Authority in relation to building in climate resilience into one of our PSPs here. So a bit of a quick rundown on Melton. So as shown on the map on the right there, you can see that we're just on the fringe of Melbourne CBD, about 25 kilometres west from the centre of Melbourne at our most eastern point. So that's a little bit confusing. We've gone through some rapid growth over the last 20 years. So about 20 years ago, the population for Melton was sitting at about 52,000 people. And today our numbers are sitting up at about 190 and forecast to go up and over 500,000 people when urban development is fully realised in about 30 years' time. There's a couple of major key waterways that run through Melton. They are the Werribee River and the Cororoy Creek. But the map on the left shows our predominant ecosystem or ecosystems that are present in Melton at the moment, which is the grasslands, which is the light purple, and then the grassy woodland, which is the dark purple. And then you've got a small smattering of green in there, which is a combination of both. Post-settlement, in Melton was largely cropping and grazing, broadacre cropping and grazing. And one of the big things I wanted to stress too was that Melton's natural environment is dry. We have a low rainfall, so we've probably got a rainfall that's on a par with Adelaide to give people on the call a bit of an understanding. So it's already a dry environment. And then with the impacts of climate change and the things that we're trying to work through as a municipality with our current environment on top of what we're trying to plan for in terms of climate resilience. Thanks, Anastasia. So in terms of what we're planning for when we talk about the climate resilient neighbourhoods are the things that we'd all be fairly similar with and familiar with and we're planning for across Australia in terms of the impacts of climate change. So the impacts of rising temperature, extreme weather events, such as increased frequent storm events, as well as then the issues around where we have heat waves and the like. Underlying that is also some, as I mentioned, I didn't mention, but we've also got some poor soil conditions. So we've got highly reactive soils. And then also with the urban development, we're also trying to combat some of the impacts around urban heat island effect. Thanks, Anastasia. One of the big ways that we're trying to tackle this currently at Melton is through improving our tree canopy cover. And like I mentioned, at the start of the presentation, we already operate and live within a largely treeless environment. It was grassland, so it's not unexpected that we would have low canopy cover when you compare us to, say, our neighbours over in the Shire of Yarra Ranges, who have canopy cover up at 25, 26%. It's a naturally forested environment, whereas we're naturally grassland. So with our numbers sitting down at 5.5% for urban canopy, that's a big challenge for us to tackle. And this is also compounded by the image shown on the right, where we have, as many people would be, it's fairly similar aerial image for many growth areas, is that we have narrow streetscapes, tiny front yards, and almost non-existent backyards. So trying to get canopy trees into our streetscapes is a big challenge for us. We have a target of increasing our canopy cover to 30% by 2040 within our urban environments to tackle that impact of the urban heat island effect, but also just to make the streets more enjoyable for people to walk or wheel down, and hopefully encourage more people to leave their cars in the driveways is the goal. Fortunately, as I mentioned before, the Victorian Planning Authority has acknowledged some of the issues that urban growth councils in Victoria, and particularly in Melbourne, have been facing around the way that we have been doing our urban development over the last 10 or 20 years. And so they're starting to work, and it's really encouraging to see some of the work that they're doing with the Melton East PSP to incorporate some climate resilience into that, and that thinking and that planning into it, and what that will mean. I'll hand over to Anastasia now, who will go into more detail on that process. Thanks, Anastasia.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. I will take over from here. So as Justin mentioned, I'm Anastasia, Senior Strategic Planner at Council. And I'm going to talk about a new climate resilient precinct that is currently being planned in our city, the city of Melton. As William explained earlier about growth area council context. So we are a growth area council in metropolitan Melbourne. And before the development starts in growth areas, we need a precinct structure plan, or a PSP, to be prepared. So what the PSPs are? A precinct structure plan is a high-level planning document. It shows the allocation of housing, community facilities, parks, and servicing infrastructure. You can see an example of a future urban structure plan from a precinct structure plan on the screen at the moment. And PSPs are prepared by the Victorian Planning Authority, our state government, and councils are usually playing a supporting role in this process. PSPs are developed in accordance with the Victorian Planning Authority guidelines. And up until now, climate resilience has not been formally integrated into the precinct planning process. So the Melton East PSP, which we are going to talk about in a minute, is highlighted here on this plan in this green-blue color. So since 2010, the city of Melton has had in total 13 PSPs prepared, and we've got about the same number of PSPs still to be prepared. So for some time, our council, as well as other growth area councils, have been requesting the Victorian Planning Authority to integrate climate resilience into the PSP planning process. And now we are very glad to witness in the city of Melton a change to this process, and it will now include the climate resilience framework into the Melton East PSP. So the PSP is a residential one. It will accommodate about 34,000 people, and we are planning for nearly 13,000 residential lots in there. Some detailed numbers are on the screen. A bit of further background. In 2022, the Victorian Planning Authority engaged a consulting firm, Hip Behive, to prepare the climate resilience assessment for the Melton East PSP. The assessment was finalized recently in July this year, and the report is available on the VPA website. So background work, which was done as part of this assessment, confirmed that the PSP is already experiencing higher than average temperatures compared to, well, similar rural areas. And the study also estimated that the trees cover less than 3% of the PSP site. And as Justin mentioned earlier, lower tree coverage is typical for our rural areas in Melton. But once they're getting urbanized, it presents a very good opportunity for us to increase tree canopy. So the study showed that by 2070, the urban heat island effect that is caused by higher temperatures will intensify in the PSP area, and it will result in higher risks for its future residents. So the climate resilience assessment proposed about 50 interventions to consider for inclusion in the precinct structure plan that will help to reduce the urban heat island effect. And one of the key recommendations is a requirement for a 40% tree canopy cover in the PSP area. And 40% is higher than 30% target that is currently set by Plan Melbourne. So achieving this 40% target is about making informed choices. So the report emphasizes a requirement to use climate resilient tree pellet that is sustainable to local soil conditions. And Justin again mentioned that our soil conditions are not the best in Melton. And a strong focus in the report is also given to our local travel routes and the ways to minimize surface temperatures to make them cooler. So the report proposes shadeway cross sections as a planning tool to deliver the cool routes. And an example of shadeway cross section is shown on the screen here. Just to note that it has been designed, this shadeway cross section has been designed for a PSP delivered in the east of Melbourne. And we are very excited to see now how a shadeway cross section will look like for us in the west. For the Melton East PSP. So beyond the shading, another important aspect is creating cool routes. Another important aspect of creating those cool routes is about the way how the streets absorb water. And recognizing this, the report proposed 30% permeability target within the streets. And to put that into perspective, there is currently no standard in PSPs in Victoria that could demonstrate how the street absorb the water from the rain effectively. And the report also proposes a requirement for passive irrigation for street trees using stormwater. So I'll stop on that in a little bit more detail now. It's also worth noting here that Council has already introduced passive irrigation methods in some of our existing PSP areas. And here is our design of the passive irrigation curb inlet. And we require this to be delivered in our PSP areas. So in practice, I will try to explain it in a highly untechnical language. So it works in the following way. When it rains, stormwater runs off road surfaces and into the gutters, and the inlet is set into the curb and captures stormwater to water street trees before it goes into the drain. The tree pit contains layers of special tree-friendly materials that filters pollution from the stormwater, and it helps each tree pit to work as a small rain garden. So just back to the previous slide. So other recommendations from the report included sustainable design for developments, for example, EV chargers, light-colored roofs, and other climate resilient design elements. Okay, so the report concluded that if all of its 50 recommendations are implemented, it will help to reduce carbon emissions by approximately 70%. And as Council, we welcome the integration of climate resilience framework in the Melton East PSP, and we support the recommendations of the report by Heathby High. Currently, we are working closely with the Victorian Planning Authority to test these recommendations, and we support the inclusion in the PSP document as requirements and guidelines. So when the Melton East PSP is prepared, It will guide developers and council on how subdivisions and development should respond to climate change to protect its future residents from the future weather shifts and natural disasters. And we are very excited to be the first council in Victoria to try this new approach, and we hope that the VPA will include it in other PSPs in the future. Council already has some good experience in delivering green outcome in our urbanized growth areas. And on your left and in the center, you can see one of our new suburbs, Aintree, that has been delivered through the PSP process. And on your right is a snapshot of the future Melton East residential precinct, which is aiming to even achieve this outcome. So it concludes our presentation for today, and I will now hand it back to Bronwyn.
Thank you very much, Justin and Anastasia. That was really great, really exciting, and it's wonderful to see a growth area pushing the boundaries like that on what can be achieved. And we really look forward to seeing how you go working with the VPA on implementing all of those findings in the PSP.